My defining characteristics as a young person growing up in high school was I was an athlete. That's what I did. Athlete, athlete, athlete. I played every sport at a pretty high level. And then I was actually recruited to Princeton to play football, but my father was an engineer, and I decided that I was going to be an engineer. So I set out to get an aerospace and mechanical engineering degree. But I was so scared about going to Princeton and trying to be an engineer that I decided I wouldn't play any of my normal sports, football, baseball. I would go out for the golf team. And golf had kind of been a hobby, and fortunately I was pretty good at it. And so this whole thing of varsity sports and being on a team, and particularly a sport like golf, which is really a game of strategy. It's not a physical game, it's a mental game. And once you get to a certain level of golf, hitting the shots is not the problem. The problem is controlling your emotions, taking good risks. And so that was, I think, one piece of the equation. So I get to Princeton, and I'm on the golf team. And then Jeff, I just can't believe it. You know what? I had to get a student job because I was on financial aid. Guess where I worked? In the dining hall. Here's the difference. I never got out of the dining hall. So I started out running the dish machine, and then I started waiting. By the time I graduated, I was actually running the students at the dining hall, hundreds of students at the dining hall. That is the only reason I got into Harvard Business School. I had good grades in engineering, but basically I had risen and I had proved that I had some managerial, potential, and I actually learned something about organizations and how things work. So the student job, in a sense, was a seminal event. And then I got to HBS, and I encountered another really serious problem, and that is at HBS we discuss cases, and at least 50% of your grade is based on what you say in class, day after day after day. And all of us HBS faculty, we mark every student's participation every day. So this is a big deal, And so here I was, an engineer. I'd never spoken in class for 4 years. All I did was just, do problem sets and solve equations. And so I was terrified. I was just like completely dysfunctionally terrified by sitting there in the HBS classroom. All these smart young students were raising their hand, these British kids that were so articulate, and here I was, this engineer, I couldn't say anything. And there was just this pit in my stomach. Literally every day I would go to class with a pit in my stomach. What am I going to do, And you know what changed that? It changed overnight. I had a professor by the name of C. Roland Christensen, and HBS folks here will have heard that name. C. Roland Christensen was the greatest case method teacher of all time, revered guy, happened to be a strategy professor. One day before class, he always got there early. One day, he's this very unassuming guy from Iowa. He sort of tiptoes up to me in his white shirt with rolled up sleeves, hands me a note. I hadn't said anything in class. I was terrified. It was a nightmare, That note said something like, "Mr. Porter, you have a lot to contribute to this course. I can tell. I'd like to hear more from you." Okay? How did he ever write that note? How did he decide to give that note to me? I didn't deserve it. I mean, I didn't do anything. I didn't think to deserve it. That note completely transformed my entire Harvard Business School career. I became probably overly talkative in class because I had the confidence to do it because of what he'd instilled in me. And of course, since he was a strategy professor and since I was captivated by the material he was teaching, I set out to do work in that field. And the rest is kind of another story for another time. But you can see how these journeys have these sort of inflection points. And I think what I would leave this story with is the sense that when these things happen to you or when you have an opportunity, I think you just have to let yourself go with it. And I was able to go with it, and ultimately I started out to be a professional engineer. I ended up being an academic. How could that have happened? It happened because of a series of these events, and a professor was kind of fundamental to the process. Right.